An impactful injury-filled Week 8 is now in the books. So you know what that means. It's time for the Sports Ball Network's NFL Week 8 breakdown. Thursday night kicked off the week with a 24-18 Buffalo victory over Tampa Bay. And for this game, it was a pretty simple storyline. Josh Allen got back to his usual self. Star quarterback threw for 324 yards and 2 touchdowns, ran for 41 on the ground, and added another score. And he was the engine that made this Bills offense go. Josh was making routine plays all night long. He was making tough throws look easy. And after a rough couple weeks, it was really good to see him back in form. For Tampa Bay, was a rough performance, and the score does not indicate necessarily how close this game was. Tampa was trailing pretty much the entire time after a brief stretch in the first quarter. They did make it interesting in the end. There was the Hail Mary on the final play of the game that could have been caught for a touchdown. But really, the Bucks showed this week that if they go up against a team like Buffalo, they're probably going to get outclassed. Still, this team isn't bad, and 8 weeks in, sitting at 3-4, can still potentially compete for an NFC South that remains pretty tied up. A battle between the number one and number two overall picks in this past year's draft kicked off things Sunday morning with number one pick Bryce Young getting the better of number two pick CJ Stroud and earning his first NFL win. As Carolina ended up taking this one over Houston 15-13 in what can only really be described as an ugly game. But Bryce Young continued to develop. He did not make any major mistakes, threw for 235 yards and a touchdown. Adam Thielen continued to produce 8 receptions for 72 yards. And the Carolina defense did just enough to stop what has been a pretty decent Houston attack. CJ Stroud struggled overall on the day. He was 16 for 24 for 140 yards. He did run for a touchdown, though. Still, this game showed that both quarterbacks have a ways to go, but both also have a lot of promise. And particularly for Carolina, getting your first win and ensuring that you do not go 0-17 has to feel really, really good. For Houston, on the other hand, at 3-4, they have fallen off a bit after a hot start. But really, nobody thought the Texans were going to make the playoffs. They were making things interesting for a few weeks, but they're still a year or two away, and that showed this week. Still, promising future ahead for this team and for the quarterbacks that played in this game. The Cowboys blew out the Los Angeles Rams 43-20 coming off of the bye, and Dallas once again looks really, really good, much like they did at the beginning of the season. The Dallas defense had 2 sacks, a safety, a clocked kick, an interception, and a touchdown. Really just dominant stuff from them. On the offensive side of the ball, Dak threw for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was really good, and everything was humming for the Cowboys. Really, there's not much else I need to say for the Cowboys. They were firing on all cylinders here. As for the Rams, quarterback Matthew Stafford suffered a UCL injury. He's week to week. That is not good for them, considering they are now at 3-5 and a solid 2 games back from the division-leading Seattle Seahawks. More on them later. And this Rams team's hurting after a good start. They lost Kyron Williams. They could lose Matthew Stafford. And after their last couple of performances, which were mostly uneven, injuries is really the last thing this team needs, especially if they have any playoff aspirations, which I would presume they still do. A couple more weeks of this, though, might just change that. Minnesota's 24-10 win over division rival Green Bay Packers does not feel like a win. Team moves to 4-4, but really that doesn't matter because the story out of this game is that quarterback Kirk Cousins, who was playing at an MVP level for large stretches of this season, tore his Achilles. He's out for the season. This injury really, really puts a dark cloud on this game. Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback, and he was playing at an MVP level for a large stretch of this season. He had a couple signature wins these past couple weeks. He was leading the team back. The Vikings were 4-4. They had all the momentum in the world. And now, after the trade deadline, they're probably starting Josh Dobbs at quarterback. This is rough. The season's probably over, and it's due to a non contact injury. Worse still, this might be Kirk's last game as a Viking, especially if you take into account that there were a lot of rumors that Minnesota was going to move on after this season. Really, really terrible situation. I wish the best for Kirk as he recovers. There is another side to this game. Green Bay Packers continue to struggle on the offensive side of the ball. They fall to 2-5. Jordan Love does not look like he's an NFL caliber quarterback for large stretches of games. This one was no different. He was 24 for 41, 229 yards, touchdown, interception. He was inconsistent best. This Packers team was going to struggle after losing Aaron Rodgers, but I did not expect them to struggle this badly. Really, this highlights just how good Rodgers was and really how bad of a job they did building around him throughout his whole career. And now the consequences are showing, and they're bad for Green Bay. Packers fans, this is going to be a rough, rough season. So you're going to have to take the good with the bad, and just hope that 2024 is just a bit better for you. The New Orleans Saints ended up beating the Indianapolis Colts in an exciting 38-27 shootout. Running back Alvin Kamara continues to dominate. He ran for 59 yards and a touchdown, hauled in 4 receptions for 51 and a touchdown. And through these first 5 games that he's been back, he has accrued a ridiculous stat line of 320 yards on 2 touchdowns on the ground and 39 receptions for 228 yards and a touchdown in the air. He looks like he is not missing a beat after a down year last season. Derek Carr threw for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Rashid Shaheed hauled in 3 receptions for 153 yards and a touchdown. He is a dynamic, deep threat for the Saints offense that was sorely missing that last year, and now they have it in him. 4-4, the New Orleans Saints are very firmly in the division race in the NFC South. Everything's still really tight in this division. And really, I think if they play like this, they are likely to win it. The Indianapolis Colts, meanwhile, fall to 3-5. Gardner Minshew did not run for 2 touchdowns this week, but he did throw for 2 more. He had 213 yards in air with those 2 touchdowns as well as an interception. He was relatively efficient. Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss both looked really good in this game. Moss, 66 yards and touchdown on the ground. Jonathan Taylor, 95 yards on the ground. And it just wasn't enough for Indianapolis. Despite a really good effort on offense, they weren't really able to get anything going on defense, getting only a single sack. And again, Indianapolis really isn't playing for this year, but it's good to see that the team is putting in a lot of effort, that they're starting to buy into Coach Shane Steichen's culture, and they're working on improving from what they did last year. So arrow still very much up in Indianapolis. The clock struck midnight on quarterback Mac Jones after a magical performance last week, and he fell down to earth along with the rest of the New England Patriots as they lost to the 6-2 Dolphins 31-17. The Patriots did not look very good on offense. Mac Jones threw for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as an interception. He did not look comfortable all game. Nothing really got going in the running game. Zeke ran for 36 yards. Ramondre ran for 39. Not really good. Wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, who was having a bit of a breakout season, unfortunately tore his ACL. His year is done. And really, that just makes this Patriots offense that much less dynamic. Uh, Defense isn't going to be able to carry them forever. And even if the defense did get an interception, a couple sacks in this game, it clearly is not enough when the offense can't do anything in New England. For Miami, Tua had a good game. He threw for 324 yards and 3 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert ran for 46 on the ground and a score. The defense had an interception and 3 sacks. And overall, it was just a strong effort from a team that is now 6-2 and tied for the best record in the AFC. Do I think Miami is going to win the Super Bowl, given what we've seen from them so far this year? Probably not. But I feel like if a couple things go right, they definitely can make a lot of noise in the playoffs. And if a couple more things go right from that, then hey, who knows? Maybe they will. A rainy, ugly day in North Jersey led to an ugly game of football in the Meadowlands between the New York Jets and the New York Giants. But it was the Jets that ended up grinding out a 13-10 overtime victory. Zach Wilson was not particularly great in this game. 240 yards and a touchdown on 17 out of 30 passing, but he did enough and he showed that he might have something yet in this league. Those last 2 drives could be career defining for him. Marching the Jets down the field under 30 seconds to go to get the game tying field goal, and then promptly marching them down the field in overtime to get the game winning field goal is something that good quarterbacks do, and is something that we have not seen Zach do throughout his career. New York Jets move to 4-3. They have playoff aspirations, and I did not think I would be saying this after Aaron Rodgers or his Achilles. So if Aaron Rodgers continues his freakish recovery and the Jets continue winning, we may very well see New York finally break their playoff drought. New York Giants fall to 2-6, and it feels like their season is done. They had to play Tommy DeVito at one point at quarterback because starter Tyrod Taylor went out with an injury. At that point, they were not throwing the ball at all. Saquon had 128 yards on 36 carries, and he was everything on the Giants this week on offense. And it's a rough season for the New York Giants. We may be getting Daniel Jones back next week. We'll see. But at this point, given that the team is 2-6 and they're now trading away defensive starters, including star tackle Leonard Williams, it feels as though New York is just turning the page on this season and looking to next year. The Jacksonville Jaguars ended up beating the Pittsburgh Steelers handily 20-10. Running back Travis Etienne continued his touchdown streak. He ran for 79 yards and converted on a 2-point conversion, had 3 receptions for 70 yards and a touchdown. And really, he looks like a top 5 running back in the league right now. Over the past 4 weeks, he's had at least 1 touchdown, and he's had 3 weeks of those 4 with at least 2. On the season, he has 583 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground, 266 and a touchdown in the air. And really, he is breaking out in his 3rd season. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence in his 3rd season as well looks to continue to improve. He had 292 yards and a touchdown. He did have an interception, but overall, he led the Jacksonville offense to a pretty efficient day. The defense for Jacksonville had 2 interceptions and 3 sacks and really just terrorized Pittsburgh all game long. And the biggest thing for this team is that they are 6-2, and ever since the London games, they have not lost. At this rate, we might be seeing Jacksonville go deep into the playoffs and potentially as the number 1 seed if things break right. Pittsburgh, meanwhile, falls to 4-3. Kenny Pickett had a rib injury, so Mitchell Trubisky had to start for a large part of this game. The Steelers only managed 32 yards on the ground between their top two running backs. And the defense, the defense did what it usually does. It had an interception and three sacks, but the defense could not score points. So that is why Pittsburgh lost this game. The offense really has been terrible all season long. I'm quite frankly shocked that there hasn't been a change by now up in Pittsburgh, but not too surprised. Pittsburgh is typically a franchise that doesn't make any moves until the end of the year, but one has to imagine with a performance as poor as this, even they would consider making some sort of change. But for those Steelers fans that want to change an offensive coordinator, I'm sorry, you're probably going to have to wait until the end of the year. Which, considering how good this defense is extremely unfortunate because honestly, a change in the offense and the scheme for Pittsburgh may be the difference between making or missing the playoffs. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy making football videos on YouTube. Speaking of things that I did not know that Will Levis was potentially this good. He led the Tennessee Titans in his first ever start to a 28-23 victory. The rookie quarterback had four touchdowns, including three to star wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, and really looked poised all game long. I'm not going to anoint Will Levis as Tennessee's franchise savior just yet, especially considering he had one game against the Atlanta Falcons. But he had a really, really, really good start to his career. And if he keeps this up, who knows where this season is going to take Tennessee? They're not trading Derrick Henry, and they have some talent on this roster. So they could potentially be a second half team to watch out for. Atlanta finally did what people expected them to do. They benched quarterback Desmond Ritter at halftime. They put in Taylor Heineke, and it really did not do much for them. Atlanta's offense was not able to manage a lot. Heineke out of the half had 175 yards and a touchdown, which isn't bad, but not amazing. Bijan Robinson continues to somewhat struggle. He had 62 yards and a touchdown. And the Atlanta defense really was not much of a factor in this game. The Falcons feel like a team that's better than their record, and at 4-4, technically they're tied with the Saints for the division lead, but the Saints actually look like a decent team here. Atlanta, for a lot of the season, has not, and really they've had a few breaks in games that they probably should have lost. And with performances like this, you're starting to see why people thought this team could be a potential bottom five squad in the league. As for me, I wouldn't be too surprised if by the end of the season, Atlanta does not have a very good record and they potentially look to hit the reset button. That coach and that quarterback. The Cleveland Browns were unable to hang on in the end, falling to 4-3 as they lost to the now 5-2 Seattle Seahawks 24-20. Quarterback PJ Walker struggled in this game. He had two interceptions and was under 50% completion rate. On the ground, Cleveland was all right. They had 37 yards out of Jerome Ford, 41 out of Peter Strong, 55 and a touchdown on a Kareem Hunt. Mari Cooper bounced back from a poor week. He had 6 receptions for 89 yards. And the Cleveland defense really was not its usual dominant self. It had 2 interceptions and a sack, but it also gave up 24 points and broke when the team needed them most. The Browns feel a lot like the Steelers, except with a slightly better offense. And I really don't know what to make of this team. On the one hand, they probably should be the favorite for this division just based on talent. And at the same time, quarterback Deshaun Watson continues to stay out of games with injuries and potentially issues beneath the surface with the team. And combined with injuries, it's just been a frustrating season for Cleveland fans who, despite having a winning record, can't really feel good about this team. The Seahawks, meanwhile, are now the surprise leaders in the NFC West after the 49ers lost to the Bengals. More on that in a minute. And this is despite the fact that Geno Smith continues to not have a great year. He had two more interceptions in this game, was not making the routine throws we saw him make last year. But still, when it mattered most, he clutched up and won this game for this team. Seattle is probably going to be a playoff team in the NFC. And at this point, given how the 49ers look right now, might be able to even host a game. Speaking of those San Francisco 49ers, they have now lost 3 games in a row after starting 5-0. They fell to the now 4-3 Cincinnati Bengals, 31-17. Let's talk Cincinnati first. Joe Burrow, he looked great. He was 28 for 32, 283 yards and 3 touchdowns. He looked mobile too, which is really good. He was dealing with that leg injury earlier this season, and now he finally seems to be back. The Bengals defense had 2 interceptions and 2 sacks and really put in a strong performance. And at 4-3, Cincinnati it seems to be closing in on Baltimore and potentially could look to have a late season surge and take the division if the Ravens slip. As for the 49ers, I mentioned before they have now lost 3 games in a row. Brock Purdy has had 5 interceptions in the past 3 games, and he had 3 turnovers, including a fumble in this one. But it was most concerning to see him take another hard hit and appear to potentially have another concussion. Uh, Purdy has not looked like his usual self these past 3 weeks, and although we can't completely blame it on potential injuries, I do think that him having these concussions and these hard hits levied against him are really having an impact here. San Francisco is now in second place in their division. They could struggle. And unless they make any sort of major move, then they just traded for Chase Young. All right. Well, we'll see what happens here, but San Francisco is not in a great spot right now. But with moves like that, they could potentially be in a much better one come next week. Man, what is it with the Eagles playing this Washington team way, way closer than they should? I mean, yeah, the Eagles moved to 7-1. They have the best record in the NFL, and they won 38-31. But they let the Washington Commanders score 31 points on them. Yeah, Jalen Hurts looked awesome. He had 319 yards and 4 touchdowns. But Jalen also doesn't play defense in the fact that he had to come back in this game after being down 17-10 at one point going into the half. And it's really bad. This Eagles defense is not the same unit that it was last year. It's much more susceptible. And honestly, it's a bit concerning. And yes, I know I'm nitpicking here. The Eagles have the best record, whatever. If you were a fan of this team, you would understand. Washington looked really, really good. Sam Howell threw for 397 yards and 4 touchdowns. He did have an interception, but overall, a fantastic game from him in what is essentially his 8th start. Uh, Guy's a baller. Ryan Robinson looked all right. He had 59 yards on 10 carries to go along with 20 yards through the air on 2 receptions. It just wasn't enough for Washington. Their defense was not particularly great. They only gave up 2 sacks. And speaking of that defense, they traded Montez Sweat to Chicago. They traded Chase Young to the 49ers. And it seems like they're blowing it up a bit there. It's a bit confusing considering Washington was pretty competitive this game and honestly could still maybe compete for wild card. But I guess we'll see why they did what they did over these coming weeks. But still, really good game from the Washington offense. Really good game from Sam Howell. And hey, they might have a quarterback here. The Baltimore Ravens moved to 6-2 after their 31-24 victory over the 1-7 Arizona Cardinals. Lamar Jackson had an okay game. He had 157 yards and a touchdown. Didn't do a lot. Didn't really need to. Gus Edwards had 3 total touchdowns on the ground to go along with 80 yards on 19 carries. And the Baltimore defense had 2 interceptions and 2 sacks. Baltimore, right now, leading the AFC North, has to feel really good with where they're at. But of course, they have Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland all at 4-3, ripping at their heels. So really, they can't let up here. Arizona, meanwhile, falls to 1-7. They are probably getting Kyler back this week. Joshua Dobbs has been traded to Minnesota. That to me indicates that Kyler is likely to start for this team. Uh, Not a great week for them overall. No wide receiver got above 58 yards. Trey McBride, though, at tight end, had a great game, 10 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. He looks like a future star at the position potentially. The Arizona Cardinals defense did have 4 sacks, no turnovers, but hey, 4 sacks is pretty good. This team still continues to buy into Jonathan Gannon's culture with the year one coach, getting a lot of effort out of these players. And with Kyler back, I expect this team to potentially take it up a notch, win a couple more games, but still not a great team in Arizona this year. We came in knowing that, and they are on track for a top 5 pick. The Kansas City Chiefs ended up losing. What? I'm not reading that right? No, 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 no. I am. Okay. All right. Change of plans. Let's rewrite the script a little bit here. The Kansas City Chiefs ended up losing to the Denver Broncos 24-9 in what is Patrick Mahomes' first road loss against the AFC West opponent. You heard that right. This is Patrick Mahomes' first loss against a division rival when he is not at home, which is unbelievable to think about. But considering Mahomes had 2 interceptions in this game, no touchdowns, and was really just not good all game long, it's a lot easier to understand. Really, the only silver lining for Kansas City is that their defense was really playing lights out. It had 6 sacks, a block, and a field goal. Really, they had a standout performance. But for the offense, this is a game that they're going to want to forget. And luckily, at 6-2, and on top of the AFC, Kansas City is going to be able to do just that. Denver, meanwhile, made their season a lot more interesting. Russell Wilson had 3 touchdowns, though he only threw for 114 yards. The Denver defense had 2 interceptions, 3 sacks, and only allowed 9 points. And really, this was just a stellar effort by a team that, after losing to a Miami squad that put up 70 points against them, has turned it around and has not given up. People like to dunk on Sean Payton, and rightfully so. He has not had a great season this year. But that has to be noted as well, that this team has turned around since that loss and has really started to put themselves together. Who knows? Maybe in the second half, Denver goes on a bit of a run here. Not that I think they'll make the playoffs, but if they continue to play like this, well, I'll just say that anything's possible and leave it at that. On Sunday Night Football, the Los Angeles Chargers had a comfortable 30-13 victory over the 2-6 Chicago Bears to move to 3-4 on the season. Quarterback Justin Herbert was 31 for 40 for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. Running back Austin Eckler had 29 yards on the ground, but more importantly, 7 receptions for 94 yards and a touchdown. The Chargers defense had a sack and 2 interceptions. Really bring it to rookie quarterback Tyson Bagent all day long. This is a game that Los Angeles should have won. Nobody really expected Chicago to come in and win. So for a Los Angeles team that likes to mess up these types of games, getting a victory here is good. And at 3-4, the Chargers may not be in the playoff picture right now in the AFC, especially considering how good a lot of the teams in the conference are. But they are a game or two back, and they have one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. So a victory like this could go a long way to galvanizing them on a run and potentially saving their season. As for Chicago, they really missed quarterback Justin Fields. Tyson Bagent had 2 interceptions in this game. He did not look good. This team did not look good. Really, the only bright spot here is tight end Cole Kmet, who, after being completely ignored last week, had 10 receptions for 79 yards. Uh, This is a game that Chicago is going to want to move on quickly from and put behind them if they have any aspirations for the rest of the season, which the front office indicated that they do, considering they traded for defensive end Montez Sweat. With Justin Fields potentially coming back next week and with the new trade acquisition, we could be looking at a potentially rejuvenated Bears squad after their week 9 game. Or we could be looking at a team that has overinvested in this season and is going to be punished as a result. But considering that they have both Carolinas and their own first rounders in this upcoming draft, that punishment might not end up being too bad. Monday night's game against the Detroit Lions and the Las Vegas Raiders was never really close. The Lions moved to 6-2 with a 26-14 victory. And really this game was all about rookie running back Jahmyr Gibbs, who ran for 152 yards and a score, as well as hauled in 5 receptions for 37 yards. Quarterback Jared Goff was efficient, 272 yards and a touchdown in the air. He did have an interception that was returned for a touchdown, but it ended up not being too costly. And really, the Lions' offense was able to move at will all game long. As I mentioned before, this was the Jahmyr Gibbs breakout game. He had 31 touches in this game and showed that he could handle a full workload. Expect him to continue to produce and to continue to get more work and more trust from the coaching staff and the team, even when David Montgomery comes back. He was that good. The Raiders, on the other hand, fall to 3-5. Jimmy Garoppolo missed Devontae Adams on several throws where the wide receiver was wide open, and the passer struggled to a 126-yard, 1 interception stat line for the day. Really, though, for Las Vegas, all of the news and all of the things going on with the team are off the field. Wide receivers Hunter Renfrow and Devontae Adams are requesting trades, but the team refused to move them before the deadline. So there's obviously a lot of dysfunction in the locker room on the offensive side. On the defense, the team has not formed up to expectation aside from Max Crosby, and this season is quickly spiraling out of control. And if things do not change for the better quickly for Las Vegas, Coach Josh McDaniels will likely find himself watching the Raiders on the couch rather than from the sidelines next season. And it turns out that this prediction I made was right. No less than 5 hours after I recorded this part of the video, the Raiders announced that they had fired Coach Josh McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler. So there we have it, the end of the Josh McDaniels era in Las Vegas. Thank you so much for watching the Sportsball Network's NFL Week 8 breakdown. If you liked what you saw, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you in the next video.